But I think at any stage in life, you have to have a purpose. And I've changed from you don't need to work, but you do need to have something that you're a purpose in that I do think a purposeful life. And it can be you can do watercolors, or it can be helping out, working on climate change, or it could be any, helping out in the hospital. But it's something you have to have some focus.
Hi, and welcome to Beyond Empty Nest. I'm your host, Jody Silverman, speaker, mentor, and Chief Dare Officer at Moms Who Dare. Every Thursday, I'll share stories of midlife transformation, happiness tips, and dare you to see the opportunities waiting for you so that you can make this next chapter even better than the last. If you're ready to dare, I'm ready to dare with you. Let's get into today's episode. Aging parents. Does anybody else out there feel as if they may not be as understanding or as empathetic to their aging parents and what they might be going through? Well, I felt that way. And when I shared that with a friend, she told me about a book called Eightysomethings, which has turned out to be a wonderful resource for not only myself, but for my parents. And today, the author of that book, Dr. Katharine Esty, a PhD, is here with me, and she's going to talk a little bit about why this book came to fruition and how we can best navigate this stage of life with our aging parents, relatives, and friends. Because let's face it, we're not getting younger, we're only going to get older. So, Katharine, welcome to Beyond Empty Nest podcast. I'm thrilled to have you here.
Well, I'm thrilled to be here. I mean, it's a subject I love to talk about, and I do think there's some important things that that I have to share that I was learned just by living as long as I have. So I'm happy to be here to talk with you.
Yeah, I love it, and we're going to dive into this conversation. I actually have your book here. You can see I have pages turned down, and I took the advice, and I bought a book for my mom, I bought a book for my father, and I bought a book for myself. We haven't dove into it together, but my mom promised me she'd read it. I'm still working on my dad. I shared that with Katharine. But I wanted to read right at the beginning, at the introduction. I love what you wrote. And then I'm going to let you talk a little bit about how the book came to be. This hit me. For many people in their 70s, life rolls along as it always has. They continue to play tennis and golf and trek in the Himalayas. They spend time at the gym and go south for the winter. They work jobs and provide care to grandchildren. As my husband John's 75th birthday party, he told family and friends, "I feel like a young man who has a few little things wrong with him." At that point, well, I'll move on. So then you said, "But at 80, I began to feel quite different. I felt I had entered a strange and foreign country without a map or a guide." And that's how that first thing I read, I'm like, that was really honest. That was like, that gave me the great insight into what my parents might be feeling, that 70 is a lot different than 80.
Yeah, it sure is. And when I was thinking about it for myself, I was surprised that nobody had written about it. They just talk about growing older, but no one had separated it out. And I kept thinking, well, there must be somebody that's written something about being in your 80s, but there's almost nothing. I would say nothing, but nobody had really taken that decade. And so that was my goal, to look at that more carefully.
So I dove right into this, but why don't we share a little bit, because I did mention you're a PhD. Why don't you share a little bit of your background so people understand where this came from?
Okay, well, my background was I have a family, started out as a mom, and then I went back to school and got a social work degree, and then later a PhD, and had a business. So I've my PhD was in social psychology. So I've done clinical work as a psychotherapist, but also looked at organizations. But my book didn't really come out of that. It came out of my own personal experience of turning 80. And as I turned 80, I had some experiences. First of all, I realized it was different. I couldn't do what I did before. And I really had an aha moment, which I talk about in the book, which is going to climb a small mountain that I'd climbed my whole life. It was just like a 2-hour walk, and I went and started out with some of my kids and some of my grandkids, and we were kind of going along. It was a little muddy, but I thought it'd be fine. And I fell, and then I fell again. And then when we got to the bottom of the steep part, I just realized I could not go up. It's a scramble. You have to hold on to there's some rocks and some trees, but so I had to sat down on a stump and I thought, I cannot be the super mom because my kids would all say, "Oh, my mom or my grandmom, she can still do push-ups. She's amazing." And then I realized I wasn't amazing. I wasn't going to go on. There was going to have to make some adaptation. And so that was my aha moment. And then in the weeks following, I realized I was kind of in a funk about being 80 because I didn't know how to be anything but the kind of super mom that did everything and tried. So I kind of took a couple of weeks and I thought about it. And finally, I decided, well, somebody must know how to do 80. I realized there were no books about it. But I started saying, well, maybe must be some people. And I knew some people that I thought were doing pretty well. And I live in a retirement community, started with a few people here. And sure enough, there were people that had made sense of the time. And soon felt so much better as I started interviewing. And I had a goal and a purpose. And I was off and running and enjoying writing. It turned into more than interviews. It was going to be a book.
Yeah, no, and and at the end of each chapter, I want to thank you for that. I wanted to tell everybody at the end of each chapter has conversation starters that you can have with your 80 something and tips for families. And you give like bullet points, and I just love how it's broken down. But I think what you said is what I've noticed with my parents. Like they're sad, they can't walk like they used to be able to walk. And my parents are good. My parents are in really good shape from my perspective. But I really did feel like I wasn't understanding it. So, this how to best navigate this stage of life with our aging parents. We're gonna talk a little bit about. Well, I want to go back. Wait, you started interviewing people where you live,
Yeah.
and I found that interesting too. There's all different personalities within
Yeah.
the 80 somethings.
Right, and that's probably the first lesson, that we're not all the same, and there's a huge variation in what people are doing, but there are some trends and some things I found. I mean, I wanted to go way far from just people in my retirement community, so I kind of went to when I traveled over the next 3 years, I gathered data, I wanted to have and I got people from all of regions of the country. I got people that were, at different levels of economic success and non-success, all kinds of ethnicities, race. And so it wasn't scientific. My book is no way academic, but it's trying to suggest the kind of multiplicity of different kinds of people and give examples. So I think it works that way too. It's not heavy reading. It's not heavy lifting. It's people can grab onto it because it isn't academic.
Yeah, and I think because of all the different interviews and the different ways you pointed out, the different thought processes with all these different male, female, 80 somethings, somebody can see themselves in somebody, and somebody reading this, an 80 something, also can see themselves as they can see somebody say, I want to think like that. And it might cause a shift. Like this is a gift. It's called 80 somethings, a practical guide to letting go, aging well, and finding unexpected happiness.
Yes, well, that was definitely the major finding, was that people, despite all the things that they are not able to do and all the losses that they undergo, that 80 somethings, most people are much happier than they were when they were 70s. They have this transition period, but then they're happy. They're and 8 people in their 80s are happier than people in their 70s. This is what not only my findings were, but the research. And I think I had to stop there and say that my book is research based too. I have a lot of it's what I in each chapter I put some statistics, some facts. So it's based on science and evidence, but as well as my personal opinions. But people in their 80s are happier than the 70s. 70s are happier than the 60s, and then happiness curve that 50s, by the way, and I'm sorry for you, is at the low point. But you can look.
Really?
Yeah, you can look forward. Every decade, you will be, the most people are happier. It gets easier. Your decade is pretty busy. You got your aging parents, you've
Yeah.
launched kids, but you got to think what you're doing next, and it's a busy time.
No, I never thought it's a full life at 50 something. Although I'm enjoying every minute of it. I think, but you just said something, something just like clicked in me, like maybe it's not about, and I said to her, maybe it's not, doesn't have to be about doing, doing, doing. And I tell my empty nest moms and my midlife women, you know, what you want to dare to do next doesn't have to mean a career. Like, Ed, do you have to earn an income? Is the first question. When people say, shouldn't I be working? Captain, they say, shouldn't I be working? I'm like, I don't know. Should you? I don't know. If you need the income, okay, let's figure out what lights you up and what you can do and enjoy. But if you don't, maybe it's not. I think that that was a common theme throughout your book, is that so many of the 80 somethings loved that they didn't have to do anything if they didn't want to do it.
Right, and I think by the time you're 80, there is a shift from focus on achievement to focus on just being, but not everybody gets there, and I have to say, honestly, that it turned out still was trying to achieve, and I still am. I'm still thinking about another book, and here I am 88 now. So, not everybody, but it seems like the better part of wisdom is that people do shift into that. You don't wanna be, achievement oriented and misery, but I think that at any stage in life, you have to have a purpose, and I've changed from you don't need to work, but you do need to have something that you're a purpose, and that I do think a purposeful life, and it can be you can do watercolors, or it can be helping out working on climate change, or it could be any, helping out in the hospital, but it's something you have to have some focus. It can be your grandchildren. I know one person whose real purpose is because she has I think I 8 or 10 grandchildren, so that can that can be a purpose, kind of, connecting to them.
I love that. I love because you have to open your expand your vision on what a purpose is. I mean, that's
Right.
what it gets. I think that's what most of these midlife women get stuck with is what's my purpose? What's my purpose? I'm like, you are your purpose.
Yeah,
Start with
yeah.
you. What would light you up? And if it's your grandchildren, then hang out with your grandchildren. I love that. Love that.
Yeah, right, and if it's a needlepoint, do that, I think, but it's also the chance for once to choose what you wanna do, and, not be, beholden to a job.
I love that. All right, so we're going to get into so you have some tips on how to have a respectful, effective conversation with your aging parents. And I think after this episode, we're gonna maybe talk a little bit more, getting back into the purpose thing. I love that because you've done so much, but I really want to bring it back to the aging parents because there's so many of us out there. Like you said, we are the sandwich generation, caught
Right.
between our launching our children and supporting and being there to care for and hold space for our aging parents. And then there's us wanting to look for our new purpose and what we want to do. So I know you write one of the tips is that most of us wait too long before starting the conversation.
Right. Well, I think people avoid difficult conversations, and any conversation. I think it helps to kind of try to get into the shoes of what is happening for these people in their 80s. And I think that is kind of a mystery for many people that are the sandwich generation and are looking. But there is kind of some dynamics that I think if you're aware, it becomes less of a mystery. And what I see is that, and I call it upside down parenting, that over time, somewhere in the late 70s, 80s, that the aging parents become, the whole thing of aging is not just always about decline, but
Right.
as you get into the last stages or later stages, there are losses, and there is some decline, and eventually, most, not all, parents become more dependent. And so that what is happening is these parents who have been the authority and the wise ones and the caretakers and the boss and the decision makers, suddenly they gradually the roles shift, and the kids that now the 50-year-old, 60-year-old, 40-year-old, whatever, the adult children of the 80 somethings take on more of the roles. They become more, in certain cases, if the parent has dementia, say, for example, they take on more of the decision making, more of they become the caretakers. So there's a kind of shift in roles. And it's, if you can see that what's happening and observe it, it's, can be managed and people adapt with grace. But sometimes people don't understand, and we saw kind of exaggerated things during the pandemic when the adult children could get very bossy.
Yes, and that's the other thing I got from your book. It's not, and I think, and I see it out there. Like you could have an older woman or man who has all their faculties, but we talk to them as if they don't.
Right, and that's right, and I think most people, I think most people in even in their 80s are active and
Yeah,
mindful, and so that they how you talk to them, you can't, as some people tried to do, they got worried about their parents and said, "You can't go shopping,"
yeah,
He sort of became the boss, and it was very offensive, I think, and
yeah,
yet, people didn't know how to they didn't the other thing we have to see is, our parents from your generation's point of view, and even from my generation's, parents and children, families are just the most important thing to most people. And the
yeah,
bonds are just never broken for most people. And I think once you understand how incredibly important families are, that's why sometimes people hold back because they don't want to hurt anyone's feelings or they don't want to mess things up. And
yeah.
yeah,
And it is important to have these conversations, but you also say it's also important to listen to your parents' thoughts about an issue first and show them that you get their side of the story.
right. You have to, I think, adult children make the mistake far too often of saying, "Mom, you've got to go to the doctor. You've got that spot. You haven't paid any attention to it. You've got," instead of saying, "Well, Mom, how's the spot coming? What do you think you're going to do?" Get them to kind of talk about it. And it's I don't know if you've seen Hamilton or not, but there's that time when he says, "Talk less, listen more." And that's what we most of us need to do with our parents, to listen more.
I'm curious what you think. I think as you're talking about this, I think it's, and I'm thinking about myself because, I don't do everything. That's why I grabbed your book. I wanted to help. And
Yeah.
it's fear based. When we tell our parents, you
Oh,
have to,
yeah.
you got to, you can't go to the store. That's our fear
Yes.
of what could happen.
Oh, yes, and I think
They
that
go
your
away.
generation, for instance, my daughter-in-law who lives near me, they wouldn't have me over during COVID, which I wanted to go, but I could see that the last thing they wanted to do was to have me catch COVID from them and kill me off. I mean, it would be just too devastating. So they're so frightened that they didn't want me to have, like, get anything from them, and so it was out of love, but it was out of fear and out of a lot of anxiety and worry. So they get people get kind of
Yeah.
bossy.
It's funny you brought up that example because I know, and that's one thing I think if we didn't learn anything from COVID, it's to take a beat, which is a pause, take a pause and understand that everybody has a different level of fear, a level of anxiety. And yet I never looked at it that I was going to give this to my mom, but my mom could make a choice whether she wanted to go to the market or not go to the market. She could come to my house or not come to my house. I wasn't, and I have, children who were like, no, they can't come to your house. I'm like, well, they can if they want to. I'm okay with it. If they're okay with it, I'm like, I can't. But everybody has a level of fear. And it was this mindset that if I get my mom or my dad sick, I'm like, and I never looked at it like I would get them sick if they got, I just don't believe that.
And I think lots of people did, and so then
They did.
so I have people that I know that are still not going anywhere. I mean, it's
I know. I
and
know.
even if people said, "Well, we're having an outdoor garden party out there. We're gonna," and they said, "No, I don't." So anyway, people make
Yeah.
their own choices, and that's a lesson to just what you named right there, that we have to allow for people to come up with different responses,
Yeah.
and people have a right. And I think one of the things that was hard for me to accept is when I went with my friends and so on, that people have the right to make some stupid choices. I mean,
Yes.
what
Yes.
but people, they have some right to do that,
Yeah, we do. Oh, God, it's so funny. It's so funny. So you can't see it, but wait, oh my God, this is so bad. But all the way up there behind me, that thing right there, it says you can't, it says
You can't
can't
fix
fix stupid.
it. Right. No,
But no, we all have the right to make our own choice. You say it with your kids. Okay, so we wait too long. So we want to be, we have to have conversations with our parents, and
right.
where you can come from a place of respect and not treating them like children.
Yeah, and I think that one of the tips is to sort of schedule it because you don't want to blindside them. People have to prepare. So, and I think that if you say you're worried, I mean, about some of the issues that people are worried about, you think that your mom or dad really shouldn't be living alone out on that country lane and just
Right.
no being so much time alone. So you I call it just scheduling a conversation. So you say, Mom, I'd really like to talk to you about just moving, whether you need to move or not, and you kinda let them get on it, and you say, "Well, let's just talk for 10 minutes." I mean, I think also parents get thinking, "Oh my god, it's gonna be a" well, so if you kind of have a number of little conversations, I think, you start with a question like, "Have you thought, Mom, about what it would be like if you considered that maybe it's time to move?" And so you throw it back to them, and
I like that. I like that. That's a good schedule a conversation and even tell them, Mom, just 10 minutes. I just want to just talk about it. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I just want to talk about it, start a conversation around it. 10 minutes, that's it.
yeah, and then you can I think that putting that cap on it makes people
Yeah.
relax a little, and then you kinda at the end of the first one, you schedule, say, "Well, let's talk next week," or something like that. "I'll be over on Thursday." I think the other mindset is that sometimes people are just say, "Well, I'm gonna get, dad to go to the doctor. I'm just gonna I don't care what happens, it's important," and they kind of wreck the relationship. So,
Yeah.
I think when you have a serious conversation that you wanna have with your parent, one of the things you need to think about is how do you want the relationship to be when you finish having these series of conversations and around a troubling issue or something that's bothering you. And I think just to remind, then I think usually people get reminded that they want a good relationship. And so then you have to think, I've got to do everything in my own mind that I want to maintain and the relationship in good
Yeah.
shape.
So I have a question. This is a good one because I am a mindset and happiness coach. Those who know me know I'm all about watching the words we use. I talk about word swapping and self talk, and not that I don't fall off that bandwagon always. I mean, we all have it. So when I hear what I perceive to be negative or the glass half empty, I like to swoop in and change that. And I think I don't necessarily think I question. I have to give. I'm curious your opinion on that because I think a lot of us do. No, no, you don't want to think that way. No, don't say that out loud. We have to let it process and let people
Right.
say what it's not always negative that they're saying something that might not be positive. It's how they're feeling.
Right, so they're feeling, and I think you have to explore it a bit, and you can't jump so fast. I think you put your finger right on, what's not working there. So, but what I find is that a good all-purpose question is to say, Susie, help me understand exactly why you feel that way. So then
Yeah.
you get the assumptions underneath it, and you can then work with it, and um, and then and then you say, well, tell me more. I still don't quite get why
Right.
want to do this. Why you think it's better to stay in a house all by yourself, and when you can't even drive a
Right.
car any longer,
Got
and
it.
you just keep asking. Then you can work with it, and you say, well, here, let's look at some options or something. Yeah.
And that goes right in hand with your the final tip on how to have respectful, effective conversations with the aging parents, which is to acknowledge their feelings. You even say you can say something like just as simple as I know this change is hard for you. It's a loss and it's very hard. And you just hold space for them and help them grieve.
Right, and it is, but, I mean, but then I think people, when they hear that see they're respected
Yeah.
and that their opinion is not just stepped on, yeah, you can say, "Well,
And my final question is something that came up recently with a couple of the women in my group. Is it what if you have that 80-something-year-old? Oh, let's call it. I think it was like their mom or something whoever was left behind was either a widow or a widower, and they were just done. They felt like their parent was just giving up. They don't want to be here anymore. They're I mean, and they were I want to say maybe they were 90, or they were just done. Like they and but yet we look at it, when I say we, our generation, like they have all these grandkids and they still have me and they still have
I
what
know that I think that, and that is kind of the most upsetting. I still get upset. One of the people I interviewed for the book was like that.
yeah.
She just was saying, "I never can get past my husband dying, and I'm, exactly what you're describing."
What do we do with that parent?
Now, interestingly, I've been. It's now like 4 or 5 years, and she was that way. But then she said, "I don't think I'll ever leave my house and my garden, and I'm just going to stay here."
Oh, I
And
read that. Yeah.
and she did move. Finally, her friends moved to a place where there's small apartments, and there's a bunch of them that are widows, and they start going places, and she started getting active again. So she did eventually come to realize that life went on, and now she's very involved in fair housing in our town, and she's so it does. I think you realize it may just take time, and you can just encourage, but it is, again, you don't want to jump in and tell them they're stupid
Right.
to feel that way, right?
Right. And I get, yeah, it's again, what I'm hearing that from everything we just spoke about, to wrap it all up, is to listen. Don't let your fear have you jump. Don't give your opinion so fast. Listen, ask questions, gain, say deeper understanding, and then schedule a conversation if you need to feel like you want to have this open conversation, but schedule it, put a limit on it. But it's the listening. It's if we can pause. The pause is such a big part of life. If we could pause and not react, because 9 out of 10 times we're reacting out of fear. Like, I don't want my mom or my dad to ever give up, which they won't, because I know their personalities. But to listen and to ask questions. And that's why I love at the end of every chapter that you give those conversation starters for everybody to ponder.
One other thing I want to put in there to say, because what you said was, I think, and we haven't emphasized enough, is there are losses. I mean, like losses, like when I had to go on a walker. That was a loss of my pride, and I'm not on the walker now, so I say it pridefully. But but we have to realize that and acknowledge that, and don't say everything's going to turn out, or it isn't a loss, or you shouldn't feel that way. You can say, of course but I think the attitude of that eventually what happens to people in their 80s, that the losses make them value and treasure what remains, and so then they did, even though they have had losses, many people, that's why they can be happier than they've ever been, despite this process of having so many losses, little ones. I mean, and the losses that hurt are things like, that you have to have a brace on your leg, or you have to, people, there's so many people lose hearing. And that was one of the things I didn't realize about aging, that it now seems like, and I think it's only a third, but enough so that they're, like in my retirement community, a good huge number of people that, and some that are so hard impaired that they can't really socialize easily. So,
Oh, I love that. And that's where the unexpected happiness. But I had a fun fact: my mother, my father, and me at 57, we all wear hearing aids.
oh,
So
really? Yes.
yeah,
Well, you've all adapted, accommodated. Well, Finn, hats off to you.
I
The
questioned.
hats off.
I asked my mom once, and she'll listen to this. She'll laugh, but she was not hearing me. I said, "Mom, are you wearing your hearing aids?" And she got upset. And I will tell you, it's a trigger. If
Yeah.
anybody ever says to me, "Are you wearing your hearing aids?" I'm like, "Dude, you don't get to ask me that." And my mom saying, "You don't ask me that anymore." I said, "You're saying this to your 57-year-old daughter who's wearing hearing aids. If anybody can ask you, I can." But yeah, all three of us wear hearing aids. It's a bonding
Okay.
moment for all of us. So thank you, Catherine, for this conversation. And I can't recommend it enough. And we'll put a link in the show notes below with a link to where they can find this book. It is a great gift for everybody, because I do believe that you can, the unexpected happiness part is a powerful, powerful chapter for everybody to read. But more than that, it's giving me an understanding of how I was reacting and not reacting, and not giving space to really have them share how they were feeling because I was scared. I didn't want them to feel that way. Just like with our children, we don't want them to feel hurt. We don't want them to feel sad. So we try and prevent it, but they have to. They have to feel these emotions to get through to the other side, which I'm telling a psychologist with a PhD this. She knows this.
Yeah.
I'm learning a lot. So thank you. I so appreciate this. But Katharine, we can't end yet because I always ask my guests to end with a dare.
Okay.
So what could you dare a midlife woman out there right now, or man, if they listen to this, to do this week?
Okay. And I think that is to think about something that they have always wanted to do, but didn't dare do, which they might be to go to a dance class or something that is a one time only. I think we should, when we're daring, we should start with a single step, not with a jump out a cliff and, to do something. So to say I'm going to, on next weekend, I'm going to do something that I have always have wanted to do. Might be to go to a place, a city that they had, like the nearby city, and take a walk. It might be whatever, something they had never done that they've wanted to do.
I
Go
love that.
swimming in the ocean. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what daring is about. It's like taking that one little step, and it doesn't have to be jumping out of an airplane, just doing one little thing
Yeah.
tomorrow or the next day that you've always wanted to do or try.
Yeah. And yeah.
With no expectation. Just
Yeah.
do it. I
Yeah.
love that. Yay. Thank you. Well, thank you so much for being part of Beyond Emptiness. This is a very important conversation. I'm excited to bring it to our audience. And listen, everybody, what landed for you? What was an aha? What was a takeaway for you that Katharine shared with you today that you can start implementing to feel better for yourself and help your aging parents or friends feel better? And let us know. Leave us a comment, leave us a review. As always, follow us, find us on social media. And as I always say, dare on. Thank you for listening to this episode of Beyond Empty Nest. Head over to jodysilverman.com for our full show notes, more information, and additional resources to support you through empty nest and midlife. And if you've enjoyed today's show and are ready to embrace this midlife chapter, then you must take the Happy for No Reason quiz. When you take the quiz, you'll discover what your happiness set point is and how you can increase it and continue to strengthen it. This is just one key to navigating life transitions and discovering your most fulfilled and daring life. So go ahead, click the link below and take the quiz now. I'll see you next Thursday. Dare on.